Hi guys, how are things? Just starting off with a bow drill. Some people have coffee every morning, I have bow drills every morning. So, we haven't seen you for a while. And we're back here today with a question that I'm struck with quite often. Excuse me, I'm a little bit out of breath. But incidentally, when you're bow drilling, you may have noticed there, when I finished with my spindle, I turned it upside down and I stuck it into the ground, securing my ember forming tip is staying dry. It's a good tip and worth taking into account. So we're here today. I suppose it's about knives what we're going to talk about today. Surprise, surprise. Anyhow, the knife we're going to talk about is this, quite well used, you can tell by the sheet, Mora Garberg. Okay. The question that I regularly get from my students and maybe on an Instagram DM or a Facebook DM or whatever, emails or hits on my websites, is I want a survival knife and what should I get? And what I learned when I started teaching survival, I've been a knife nut all my life, and it's not that I have a lot of money, but I would have no problem spending 300, 400, 500 euros on a knife at all, and I wouldn't give it a second thought. And I would have, considered this a cheap knife at 100 euros, say Home and Hose 100 euros, the Mora Garberg carbon in the leather sheet, which I recommend. I'm not too gone on that multi-mount or that plastic sheet that parts of it can clip off or come off, and it's in my thinking, anything that can easily be put on can easily come off, and as a result you can lose your knife or whatever. So it's hard to beat an old leather sheet. This has been through the wars with me, this knife has been through the wars with me, and before this I had stainless steel versions of it. As you know, the stainless steel predates the carbon one, but of course in terms of a survival knife, it's so advantageous to have a blade that is of carbon steel. Now it's a UHC steel that they use in this carbon steel, which is akin to 1095. But look, the ability in a last ditch method to be able to form even if it's a low ignition level strike off a hard rock, anything that's hitting fairly high on the mole scale over 7, will allow us to produce a spark that would even obviously would be readily accepted by Amadou or Charclot or whatever. It's very, very advantageous. It's your last ditch, and we're up shit creek without a paddle. Everybody will accept a last ditch method. So carbon, in my mind, still is what you need in a survival knife. Also, and I'm not a metallurgist or anything like that, but I find carbon steel to be tougher in a sense that maybe it doesn't have a higher rock well, and it might deform on the edge rather than chip and break away, which what I would prefer. So for 100 euros, this is a life dependable knife. It's full tang, which I always recommend. I think it would be foolish to find yourself investing in a survival knife that is either of stick tang or partial stick tang or any of those types of knives. It has to be full tang. It's really, really important. You may note this knife comes with a secondary bevel. It's not a full zero Scandi grind. Now, my thoughts on this is that I'm pretty sure back in the day the Scandinavian grind had different versions that it would appear in for different purposes, and if you could even think of sharpening a full flat Scandi grind on a wheel, it probably, by the mechanism of the wheel, would have given you somewhat of a concave hollow grind knife. Anyhow, this is secondary edge on this, makes it very, very strong and very, very suitable for game preparation, which is something, as you know, I do quite a lot of. Now, if somebody tells you that a bushcraft knife or a survival knife is not designed to prep game. That's very, very wrong, because like, I mean, at the end of the day, if we're going to be out in the woods, we want a single knife to do as many things as possible. And we must understand that even having a full tank 4mm Scandi ground, full flat Scandi ground bushcraft knife is somewhat of a compromise anyhow, because it's something that's based on a carving knife or a slide knife or something like that. So we're always compromising. So what we do need is something that's really strong enough. Now, what I've learned from my students, it's amazing, you know, you teach your students survival, but they teach you a lot about life, and they teach you a lot about what their requirements are. Because, you know, instructors like myself and other guys and girls that are instructing are hardwired into the instruction of survival, and we forget that it's actually an ancillary interest. So not everybody wakes up and goes, I want to be a survivalist, but they do want to go hill walking, they do want to go fishing, they do want to go hunting, and they do want to go canoeing, mountain biking, etc, etc. So any of these hobby pursuits that puts them in harm's way of possibly finding themselves in a survival scenario will actually need a knife like this. So your fisher person, man or woman, that's going out fishing, if they have a very, very large survival knife, which, you know, my take on that, the propensity of carry, you're not inclined to carry a 10-inch bladed knife, although a fantastic survival knife. That said, it's not fantastic for gutting a fish if you're going fishing. That said, it's not fantastic for panching a rabbit if you go out rabbit shooting. It's not good for necking a deer, etc, etc. It's probably not a good keyring accessory if you're going out mountain biking either. So a knife like this, it's big enough and strong enough to get the job done, yet it'll do all the small tasks, and this blade shape in particular is fantastic as a hunting knife. So wrist thick material, battening, it's an absolute necessity. If we can't do it, like, we need to be able to make fire. Now, what we have here is a very, very knotty piece of timber, and people say, and I've heard it said before, you know, I wouldn't be battening oak or whatever because I'm trying to make a fire. And in Ireland we're pretty much surrounded by pines and conifers and stuff like that, which are soft timbers. Now, soft timber, there's one inherent problem with soft timber: it's very, very fast growing, and as a result of that, we have always, in sharp pieces of timber, we have huge amounts of knots. These knots, your knife has to be strong enough to navigate around these, and it has to be thick enough that it's not going to really come out of shape, or at least a good enough temper that should have come out of shape that it'll spring back. But even though the timber itself is not inherently hardwood, it's very, very challenging for a knife because of the amount of knots in such a fast growing timber, you know. Now, we're going down through there. I'll move down a little bit further and we'll see if you can see. Now look, you can see that this is quite challenging for this knife. Okay, the timber is doing its best to try and shape this knife to the conformity of the timber. Now, the fact that we have a handle here that we can beat on as well is very, very advantageous in a survival scenario too, because I can do this when it starts to seesaw on me. This would be a very, very difficult task for a stick tang knife. Not impossible. And before we set out on this, if I was teaching a survival course, my first inclination would be to carve out a glut for the event of this getting stuck here that I can't get it out. Okay, so a glut, a wedge. And I have seen my students beat these knives really badly, and I have seen stick tang knives breaking. Of course they'll break, and not only did it break, but I have found with wooden handled stick tang knives, as beautiful as they are, pukas and whatnot, they are beautiful knives, there's no doubt about that. But the way the tang goes into the handle, when the material narrows like a rat tail, I have noticed that creates a kind of a tuning fork effect. So there's a vibration coming back down, and it's an awful lot of vibration through your hand, which quite often, although the knife doesn't fail, will lead to the handles cracking because of that vibration. So we can see, look at the twist in that. So ordinarily, if your knife integrity isn't strong enough, and I particularly chose a piece of really, really knotty timber to demonstrate this, and it's really worked with me. A knife that is not of a very strong construction will suffer terribly going through stuff like this. Even if it doesn't break at the tang, it'll most likely break in the blade stock. So wrist thick material is as thick as we are going to be selecting for making shelter and making fire. So we don't really need a knife much bigger than 4 inches. Now a 5-inch blade is fantastic because it gives you that extra 1 inch of tip protrusion, and I don't use a 5-inch blade to batten thicker wood. I use it to more comfortably batten the same thickness of wood. Now you can see also in a survival scenario, we would be battening. I cut this with my backhoe, and in a survival scenario we would be battening that, cross-cutting it, cross-battening it, and it's very, very important. That's very demanding on a knife too, particularly on the edge, and that's when it's vitally important that you really have some sort of a secondary edge. Now we're really hitting hard stuff here, and you can see it, that the knot is right there. And we're going down through another knot now. So this is, you know, quite challenging on a knife. So the integrity of the edge is perfect, and the handle, I've beaten on it, it's perfect. You saw me beating on it. This is why I like this knife, and I know that there'll be people who will come on and comment that maybe the Jacopuro, or I can't even pronounce that knife, but it's a similar one to this, that maybe that's better. I don't know, I haven't used that knife, but I have used this. I can't afford to buy every knife in the world and test, but once I use this and it hasn't broken on me, and we have used these in the school very, very heavily, and not once has one broken on me, it's fantastic. Another thing that I like about this, the handle, although they might look cheap, the handle, it's not slab sided, so it doesn't have micarta or whatever, either left or right of it, allowing a dirt ingress along the spine and belly of the handle, which eventually I have seen it separating knives. This is encapsulated, so we have no fear of any kind of ingress into it. So when you get this knife, the Garberg, it comes with a really, really sharp spine. Now the spine on this one, like, this has done a hell of a lot of work, but it's not quite as good as it used to be, but it's still a really good spine. But it's insane when you get it first. Something on the lines of an LT Wright Genesis. An LT, you know, they do probably the best spine in the business, but if you see, it's still sparking, okay? And so there's two methods of ferro rod usage that I teach, and one is the Ray Mears method, okay? So this is with very, very good and ready to accept ignition tinder, and that's, we plant our hand here and we draw the ferro rod back, so that secures that our flash tinder isn't going to be strewn all over. The other method, this is a bit of jute twine, the other method is on the very tip. Now interestingly enough, this method will work on a knife like a Mora Classic, because if you look at the Mora Classics, the blade is clipped in the factory and we don't have a 90-degree spine, so unless we work it with a file or whatever, but without working it on a file, this will work on those knives, on other tips like a Puko that would be wouldn't have a 90-degree spine. So we're at the very edge of the tip here, and we have our thumb on top of the knife and we're driving it in, and that creates a very, very intense spark because we're getting so much leverage on it. And yet again, so that is the Morse-Kahansky method. So we have two methods. We have the Ray Mears method and the Morse-Kahansky method, that is a better method if you're using on subjective flash tinder, that you need just a little bit more oomph. I don't know much else to say about this knife. I'm not connected to Mora in any way. I say I'm not connected. I guess anyone that teaches survival or bushcraft is connected to Mora in some way, but like, I'm not sponsored by them or anything like that. The only other thing that I have to say about the knife, I love this exposed pommel. It's a big thing for me, exposed pommels. I like them. It allows you now to use your knife in a way that you would as a chisel, which, you know, can be very effective if you're looking for grubs, or, you know, maybe something as a fishing bait, whatever. Or indeed, I know I tested this out myself and Gary one day, actually chiseling out a burn bowl. So rather than burning the bowl out, we chiseled it out, and now you have something that you could plunge a hot rock into boiled water. So being able to use your knife like a chisel has huge, huge advantages. Okay, so guys, there we have it. Nothing really more to tell you about this knife other than it's bomb proof, you know. So we'll see you next week, and good to see you again. I missed you. Bye bye.